actually brings down costs, helps with supply chain resiliency, and improves sustainability.
Your sweet spot for SAP is mid-market, which, the big, large cap companies often get a lot of the headlines, a lot of the attention, but tell us about the mid-cap space, which I think, just like small caps, tells us so much about the economy.
Yeah, thank you for asking this. Most people think SAP only serves the biggest of the world's companies, which we do, but the majority of our customers are actually mid-market. And the things that we're seeing hit big companies amplify when we talk to our mid-market customers, right? When they have little fluxes in revenue, it can have devastating impacts on their bottom line. And so working with them on how they manage inflation, better management on cash flow, better business planning. And the nice thing about cloud technology is it gives any size customer, but mid-market customers, access to the same sophisticated business process tools as a big company, right? So it really has a democratizing effect to it. So we're able to really help mid-market in the ways we help big customers, but in a way that's more agile and cost-effective for them.
What would you say is one of the biggest mistakes that you see some of these, not to put it on them, but some of these mid-sized companies making when they are struggling and they don't necessarily have access to the tools that you offer yet?
Yeah, I think that the biggest mistake is they spend too long running their company on Excel. And
right.
Again, they're moving fast, they're trying to be efficient, but they don't realize what they're missing out on. And, I was actually just recently working with a kind of mid-sized chemical company, and they waited a long time to move into automation of business processes, which it just helps a lot around efficiency and decision making. And, once they spent the time to, implement some more modern, enterprise resource management, they were able to react much more quickly, and they saw immediate results. But, they had to go through that journey to get there. And then in retrospect, they're like, we should have done this earlier, but it takes time and focus.
It does remind me a little bit, and we don't have to get into this, but it reminds me of FTX using QuickBooks. When we found that out, we were like, oh my God, how did you have such a huge company and do that? But then we talked to these startup guys who are like, if you have a big idea, just make it happen and do it. But it sounds like I'm hearing from you that you do need to focus on the bones and the infrastructure a little bit as well.
Yeah, really thinking about all these processes. Yeah, they're getting it done, but at what cost, and what are they not getting? And it's oftentimes hard to see the opportunity cost or the missed cost of what they're doing. But as we work with them, and part of it too is it used to be, big and hard and expensive to deploy an ERP or enterprise resource process. Right? It used to be on premises, but now the cloud changes that so fundamentally. But I think a lot of mid-market customers are still coming to realize that actually I can get a really robust enterprise resource system in place in a couple of months. It's not 3 years and $300 million anymore.
Julia, tell us about, just got about a minute or so left here, the feedback loop. So in other words, you're talking with your clients and customers. You're saying that these organizations are feeling the impact of the downturn in the economy, so you say about value with, fewer resources. So how do you go back to your creative team or your engineers and your solutions team and say, hey, here's what we need to be doing because this is what the customer demands?
Yeah, I think the big trends we're hearing from our customers are automation, which means, using AI to identify where there's inefficiencies and automating that out, and helping the customer be much more predictive with what's next, right? Like the world's changing fast, and all of our crystal balls are kind of imperfect these days, and so that agility to do different kinds of predictive planning is what our customers.
Is the generative AI move kind of impacting you guys all of a sudden? Because it does seem like it's all of a sudden on everybody's radar, although we know it's not brand new.
Yeah, it has, but it has definitely, hugely revolutionary opportunities with it. So absolutely looking at how we use it in a bunch of our different products, whether it's HR and onboarding to customer engagement.
All right, going to leave it there. Hey, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Julia White, she's Chief Marketing and Solutions Officer at SAP, joining us via Zoom from Seattle. Some great thoughts, and I think our perspective, too, more broadly, Maddie, about, people, clients want to spend, but they've got to do it smartly. They're thinking about the value proposition when they go to do IT spending. So I thought that was a really key component as we have our big, broad macro discussions, if you will.
And like you said, we've been talking to all of these because you make a great show, and so does the team. We've been talking to a lot of people who are behind these companies that can really be leading indicators for us about where the economy is going.
Just keeping a watch on shares of Rivian. They're still down about 8% after hours, and Novavax, down about 25% following some concerns about their outlook. All right, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Radio. check on world and national news. Over to Nancy Lyons. She's in D.C. Hey, Nancy.
Thanks, Carol. President Biden says his health care seniors who are seeing their prescription drug costs go down, but he says they're also good for the entire country.
Bringing down prescription drug costs doesn't just save money for seniors and Medicare. It's going to have a significant effect on the federal deficit. It's going to lower the debt by $159 billion.
During a speech in Virginia Beach, Virginia this afternoon, Biden warned some Republicans are insisting they'll cut spending as part of a deal to raise the debt. And he calls that a purely political move. He's urging Republicans to outline the cuts and programs they're targeting. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Michael Regan is back in East Palestine, Ohio, the scene of that toxic train wreck. Today he vowed federal help will stay there for as long as it takes for the community to recover. He did warn, though, that people should not be going into contaminated water.
Some of our creeks and our streams have pollution in them. We're working very hard to clean up that pollution. For the time being, while the pollution is present, as a father, I would not advise anybody, adult or child, play in the creeks and streams.
Reagan also announced the EPA's Community Welcome Center is now open, where residents can request air quality monitoring and can sign up for cleaning services. Federal officials are suing a Louisiana maker, alleging that it presents an unacceptable cancer risk to the nearby majority black community. Officials are also demanding cuts in toxic emissions there. The lawsuit accuses Denka, which makes synthetic rubber, of emitting the carcinogen chloroprene in such high concentrations that over a 70-year lifespan it poses a cancer risk 14 times what's acceptable. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries.
This is Sam Keane. I'm Jonathan Ferro.
And I'm Lisa Abramovic.
Join us tomorrow morning for Bloomberg Surveillance.
The turmoil, the tempest of macroeconomics in 2023. We speak with Carol Weinberg, high-frequency economics.
And on the bond stock divide, Mike Schumacher of Wells Fargo.
Bloomberg Surveillance starting at 7 a.m. on Bloomberg 1130, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
And watch us on Bloomberg Television Xfinity Channel 1122.
Interactive Brokers charges margin loan rates from 5.08% to 6.08%. Their clients can also earn extra income by lending their fully paid shares of stock. Join Interactive Brokers clients from 200-plus countries and territories to invest in stocks, options, futures, funds, and bonds globally. Minimize your costs to maximize your returns. Rates subject to change. Learn more at ibkr.com/compare.
We don't just break news, we build perspective. Bloomberg publishes over 5,000 data-driven stories a day across multiple platforms, so you can gain insight and act with confidence. Ready to dive deeper? Start at Bloomberg.com/thinkbigger. Change can be disruptive, but at Bloomberg, we think bigger. Our sell-side solutions combine trading and automation with market-leading data, so you can evolve, scale, and embrace change. This is Bloomberg for the sell side. Visit Bloomberg.com/sell-side.
Startups and research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology are fueling the innovation economy. And few people are better positioned to see what's on the horizon in New Jersey than physicist and state representative Andrew Zwicker.
How technology is transforming our financial sector is revolutionary, and so much of that is in New Jersey. We are innovators when it comes to agriculture, and there is opportunity now for great transformation in how are we going to grow food in an ever-growing population, and how do we turn urban centers into agricultural centers. Autonomous vehicles is another one where we have some of the world's leading experts, and how this will transform how those who are either elderly or are visually impaired or mobilely impaired can start to use autonomous vehicles to transform their lives and have access to transportation they could have never had before.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu/research.
Let's have a lot of people pet all those bikes. Intervals. Burn. Burn. Come on, burn. Woo!
Performance is more exhilarating on a real road. Introducing the Audi Q5 with a 261 horsepower engine that'll take you 0 to 60 in 5.7 seconds. Always obey local speed and traffic laws.
Don't let someone else drive off in the Audi model you've always wanted. Visit your tri-state area Audi dealer to get behind the wheel of yours today, or visit AudiOffers.com for more information.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest Balance of Power podcast, I speak with Dr. Matthew Lawrence of the University of Maryland Medical School about new reports that the COVID virus may have come from a Chinese lab.
It's still important to identify and figure out where this came from. It can have widespread implications in terms of laboratory safety issues, in terms of how do we reduce transmission of these particular pathogens from animals to humans, if that were the case. So really, it will help to inform future strategies to prevent future pandemics.
So I guess one of the issues is if it came from an animal, we need to focus on how we make sure the animals either aren't there or they can't transmit it. If it didn't, then all that would be wasted effort.
It is important to figure out, yes, if it did come from animals, are there ways that we can work to prevent this transmission in the future? Is there testing? Is there surveillance that can be done? And are all safety measures in place where the transmission potentially had occurred?
As we try to prepare for the next one, because I guess people think that we have to be prepared for the next one, what are the things that we should be doing in order to make sure that we can respond even better next time? What did we learn from the last one that we should really improve next time?
I think one of the first things we learned was that information sharing is absolutely critical. And one of the very first pieces of information that came out was the genetic sequence of the virus that was made public very early in the pandemic, and that allowed both therapeutics and vaccines to be advanced and developed. So information sharing is critical. Also, cases should be investigated early, and that would allow for identification and isolation of the source of infection.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Balance of Power podcast. Listen on the Bloomberg Business app, Bloomberg.com, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. It's 4:41 on Wall Street. I'm Charlie Pellet. We check the markets all day long at Bloomberg. Lots of earnings after the bell. We begin with HP Inc. Shares are up 2.3% now. HP maintaining its annual guidance for cash flow, even as it grapples with slumping PC demand, a sign it does expect a rebound later in the year. The clinical biotech firm Novavax says substantial doubt exists regarding its ability to continue as a going concern through 1 year as a result of uncertainty around its revenue and funding sources. Fourth quarter revenue missed estimates. That stock plunging after hours, down now by about 24%. Also reporting after the close of trading, Rivian Automotive, it forecasts building as many as 50,000 electric vehicles this year, double its 2022 production, but still below Wall Street's expectations. After hours, Rivian is down by about 8.2%. We have closed the books on the trading month of February. Where has this year gone already? For the month, the S&P down 2.6%. It is on to March. Today, losing day with the S&P down 12, down by 0.3%. The Dow today down 232, down 0.7%. Nasdaq down 11, a drop of 0.1%. 10-year yield 3.92%. Spot gold up $10 the ounce, up 0.6%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.3%, 76.67 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Master along with Maddie Mills live here on Bloomberg Business Week. And there was a story on Bloomberg that caught our attention today. It's about how a new era of books are helping black workers navigate corporate America. It's important as black workers still lag their white counterparts, particularly when it comes to the highest paying and most powerful jobs. So our next guest, Maddie, certainly understands this and the importance of diversity in any organization.
Absolutely. With us now is the author of Rising Together, How We Can Bridge Divides and Create a More Inclusive Workplace. The author, Sally Helgeson, who is also a speaker and leadership coach, is with us via Zoom in New York City. Sally, thanks so much for making time for us. One of the things I'm struck by in the book is even just the emphasis you have on we, how we define we, how we create a we, how we get there. But it feels like a pretty lofty goal sometimes. In creating and researching the book, what would you say is the thesis, the big lesson you learned in how to create that we at a workplace?
I think the strongest way we can create a we in the workplace is to focus on what our behaviors are rather than what the thoughts might be running through our head. There's been so much emphasis on unconscious bias and its role that I think it's gotten us more focused on our thoughts rather than our actions. So by identifying specific inclusive behaviors and by also having an awareness of the triggers that can hold us back from building strong relationships with people we may perceive as being different than ourselves. I think that's the best way to move forward.
Do you see, though, that action is maybe also linked to unconscious bias? And help me understand how they're not.
They are. Of course, they're linked to unconscious bias. But I think that it is more helpful to learn to act our way into new ways of thinking than to think our way into new ways of acting. Let me explain. When we practice a new action and we may engage somebody in a way that's different than maybe feels authentic to ourselves at that particular moment, we may get a response that gives us a new path to engaging that person and then people that we may perceive as being like them. We all know how that works. You can think you feel a certain way about a certain group of people. You know, it could be anything from some person who's heavily tattooed. I mean, that could be an example. I think that way. Well, you react in a way to a person who has that characteristic and get a good response from them and are able, therefore, to establish some kind of rapport with that person. And then you start to change your mind about people who you think are like them.
If I cut to the chase, Sally, it almost feels like actions speak louder than words. And when it comes down to it, because, to be fair, and I think about this with George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, and we had so many conversations once again about diversity and inclusion, and for someone who's like yourself probably, been covering this for a long time, I feel like I've had these conversations 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So something's got to, we're obviously not doing it right. Because we're not moving the needle fast enough. So, I think about all the training then, as a result of what you're saying, that all the training that we all go through, courtesy of our HR department. So what's one or two things that we can all kind of take to heart and do better in terms of actions?
Yeah, I'm not here to diss the kind of inclusive bias training that organizations have been handing out for the last 10 years, although I've seen it done wrong and I've seen it provoke backlash. I'm here to provide, if not an alternative, then the next step, which I think is focusing on specific behaviors that we